The man who died was never supposed to touch that glass. Subscribe before this story gets dangerous. The man died because I touched the wrong glass. That thought kept repeating in my head while the diner fell silent around me. 1 second earlier, Harbor Point Diner had been the same exhausted place it always was at 11:30 on a Thursday night. Burnt coffee, grease popping behind the kitchen line, the old radio near the pie display crackling through another weather report nobody listened to. Then a body hit the table hard enough to shake the ketchup bottles. A woman near booth 6 screamed. Somebody dropped a plate. And I just stood there holding my tray, staring at the man collapsed across the vinyl booth with whiskey soaking into his flannel jacket. My heart slammed so hard it hurt. I had seen the bartender switch the drinks. That was the problem. I should have ignored it. In Baltimore, people survive by minding their own business, especially around men like Callum Vale. Everybody near the harbor knew his name even if nobody admitted it out loud. Logistics owner. Union fixer. The man who solved problems that never made the news. I had served him black coffee and whiskey twice a week for almost 8 months. He always sat in the same booth near the fogged-up windows. Always quiet. Always watching everything. Tonight had felt wrong the second he walked in. 2 unfamiliar men sat at the counter pretending to watch the Orioles recap, while tracking him in the mirror behind the bar. Then I saw the bartender pour something into the whiskey. Just a tiny blue shimmer under the hanging lights. My stomach dropped instantly. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe growing up around addicts taught me how to recognize danger before other people noticed it. Whatever the reason, my body moved before my brain did. I grabbed the wrong glass while refilling napkins and switched them in silence. Nobody reacted. Nobody noticed. 20 seconds later, a dockworker named Pete Nolan grabbed the poisoned drink by mistake while laughing at something on his phone. Then he collapsed. The memory hit me again so hard my knees almost gave out. I backed into the service station, gripping the counter edge. Breathe. Just breathe. But the diner suddenly felt too small. Too hot. The air stuck in my throat. I heard chairs scraping across the floor as customers rushed toward the exits. Ellis, the owner, was yelling for somebody to call 911. Through all the noise, one thing terrified me more than the dead man lying motionless in booth 4. Callum Vale had not looked surprised. He looked directly at me from across the diner with those cold gray eyes like he already knew exactly what I had done. Not angry. Not confused. Calculating. Like he was rearranging the next 10 minutes of both our lives inside his head. "Everybody out," he said quietly. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. The room moved instantly. Even Ellis stopped talking. That was the moment I realized what kind of power this man actually had. Snow drifted outside the windows overlooking the harbor parking lot. The old radio crackled louder for a second before fading back into static. Then the front door slammed open. 2 men stepped inside wearing dark work jackets damp with melted snow. One of them scanned the diner and locked eyes with me immediately. My blood turned cold. "Boss," the taller one said to Callum without looking away from me. "Shaw knows the waitress saw everything." The panic hit all at once. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might faint. I grabbed the counter to stay upright. Callum stood slowly from his booth, buttoned his dark coat, and walked toward me through the silence. Up close he smelled like cold air, cedar, and black coffee. His expression never changed. "Listen carefully, Mara," he said. The fact he knew my name made my stomach twist. Outside, police sirens echoed faintly across the harbor. Inside, Callum glanced once toward the dead man before looking back at me. "If you leave alone tonight," he said quietly, "they will follow you home." The freezer door slammed shut behind me so hard the metal shelves rattled. I sucked in a sharp breath and instantly regretted it. The air inside the walk-in freezer burned my lungs with cold so intense it made my chest tighten harder. "Mara!" Ellis pounded once against the door from outside. "Police are here. Stay put for a minute." Stay put. Right. Like hiding between frozen fries and boxes of burger patties was going to fix any of this. I pressed both shaking hands against my face and tried to breathe slower, but panic had already wrapped itself around my ribs. Too cold. Too tight. Too small. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed softly while frost clung to the metal walls around me. I hated enclosed spaces. Always had. Ever since I was 13 and got trapped overnight in the laundry room of our old apartment building while my mother disappeared for 3 days chasing pills. My throat closed halfway just remembering it. Come on, I whispered to myself. Not now. Outside the freezer, voices moved through the diner. Deep voices. Controlled. Somebody mentioned the harbor police. Somebody else said the dead man had worked for Vincent Shaw. Then I heard Callum Vale speaking low enough I could not make out the words. The panic worsened anyway. My fingers tingled. My knees weakened. I slid down against the wall and pulled my coat tighter around me, but the cold kept sinking deeper. Minutes passed. Or maybe seconds. Time felt strange inside panic attacks. Everything narrowed into breathing and noise and pressure behind my eyes. Then the freezer door opened suddenly. Warm air rushed inside. I flinched so hard my shoulder hit the shelving unit. Callum stood in the doorway alone. Snow melted slowly on the shoulders of his dark coat. Ella said you locked yourself in here, he said calmly. I tried to stand too fast and dizziness hit immediately. The room tilted sideways. Before I could fall, his hand caught my elbow firmly. Not rough. Just steady. Easy. I am fine. My voice sounded thin and breathless even to me. His gray eyes flicked once toward my shaking hands. No, he said quietly. You are not. I hated that he could tell. I hated it even more because he was right. Callum stepped inside and pulled the freezer door halfway closed behind him, blocking the noise from the diner. The tiny space suddenly felt even smaller. My pulse jumped again. He noticed that too. Of course he did. Look at me, he said. I crossed my arms tightly instead. I really do not think that is helping. Mara. His tone never changed, but something about the way he said my name cut through the panic enough to make me glance up. Breathe slower, he said. You are breathing like you are running. I swallowed hard and tried to match the pace of his breathing instead. Slow in. Slow out. The dizziness eased little by little. Somewhere outside the freezer, a police radio crackled. Callum leaned one shoulder against the metal door frame, watching me carefully. Those men who came into the diner, I said finally. Who are they? People who clean up mistakes. The answer made my stomach twist. And the dead guy? For the first time, something unreadable flickered across his face. Tiredness, maybe. He was not supposed to drink that whiskey. The freezer suddenly felt colder again. I stared at him. So I killed the wrong man. No, his voice stayed calm. The person who poisoned the drink killed him. I let out a shaky laugh that sounded dangerously close to crying. That is supposed to make me feel better? No, he said again. But it is the truth. Silence settled between us. The old pipes overhead groaned softly. I realized then how exhausted he looked up close. Not dangerous. Not glamorous. Just worn down. Like somebody who had not slept properly in years. Then his phone buzzed in his coat pocket. He checked the screen once and his entire expression hardened instantly. We need to leave, he said. My chest tightened again. I am not going anywhere with you. You do not have a choice anymore. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and looked directly at me. Someone just found your home address. The snow outside had turned into freezing rain by the time we left the diner through the back alley. Baltimore smelled different after midnight near the harbor. Salt water. Diesel. Wet concrete. The kind of cold that slipped through your coat no matter how fast you walked. I stayed 3 steps behind Callum while he moved toward a dark blue pickup truck parked beside the loading dock. Not a luxury SUV. Not bodyguards and tinted windows like I expected. Just an old Ford with rust near the bumper and coffee cups stacked on the dashboard. Somehow that unsettled me more. Get in, he said. You always order people around like that? I snapped before I could stop myself. Only when someone is trying to kill them. The answer shut me up for exactly 5 seconds. You keep saying that like it is normal. Callum unlocked the passenger door without looking at me. For tonight it is. Rain tapped softly against the hood while I stood frozen beside the truck. Every instinct told me not to trust him. Men with power always came with strings attached. My mother taught me that lesson long before the pills destroyed her life. But June was home alone tonight. 17 years old. Asleep in our apartment above a pawn shop with a broken front lock Ellis still had not fixed. The thought hit my chest hard enough to make me move. I climbed into the truck. The heater groaned to life a minute later as Callum pulled onto the empty harbor road. We drove in silence past warehouses and stacked shipping containers glowing orange beneath floodlights. Somewhere in the distance, a cargo horn echoed across the water. I kept checking my phone. No new texts from June. No missed calls. Still, my stomach would not unclench. What exactly did those men want? I finally asked. Callum kept his eyes on the road. To know what you heard. I did not hear anything. You saw enough. The windshield wipers dragged slowly across freezing rain. Who is Vincent Shaw? That made his jaw tighten slightly. A man who thinks fear solves every problem. And you do not? He glanced at me for the first time since leaving the diner. I think desperate people make bad decisions. The way he said it felt less like a threat and more like experience. 10 minutes later we turned into my neighborhood in South Baltimore. Brick row houses. Flickering streetlights. Laundromats still open on the corner. The pharmacy where June worked weekends sat dark across the street. My chest loosened slightly at the sight of home. Until I saw the apartment building entrance standing open.
No. Y whisperat instantly.
Before the truck fully stopped, I jumped out into the rain and sprinted toward the stairs. Mara! Callum's voice followed sharply behind me. Ignored him. The second floor hallway smelled like cigarette smoke and old carpet. Apartment 2B stood half open. My pulse exploded. June! I shoved the door wider. The apartment looked wrong immediately. Kitchen drawers hanging open. Couch cushions on the floor. Cabinets emptied. Somebody had been searching for something. June! Panic clawed up my throat as I rushed toward the bedroom. Then I heard the shower running. A second later, June stepped into the hallway wearing sweatpants and holding a towel around her wet hair. Why are you screaming? She asked. My knees nearly gave out from relief. I crossed the room so fast I scared her, grabbing both her shoulders hard enough to make her blink. Are you okay? Yeah, she said slowly. Why do you look like you saw a ghost? Behind me, Callum entered the apartment quietly, scanning every overturned drawer with cold focus. June noticed him instantly. Who is that? I opened my mouth but nothing came out, because I honestly had no idea anymore. Callum crouched near the broken kitchen cabinet for a moment before holding up something small between two fingers. A pharmacy receipt. June frowned. That was on the counter earlier. Callum stood slowly. They were not searching for money, he said. Rain rattled softly against the apartment windows. They were confirming who lives here. By 2 in the morning, my apartment looked like a crime scene nobody planned to clean up. Drawers dumped onto the floor. My overdue electric bill soaked from rainwater near the open kitchen window. June sat cross-legged on the couch, hugging a blanket around herself while staring at Callum like he was something dangerous that had wandered into our lives by mistake. Maybe he had. You are telling me men broke in here over a waitress job? She asked finally. That is not suspicious at all. June, I warned quietly. No, seriously. She pointed toward the destroyed cabinets. I have a chemistry final at 8 in the morning, and now apparently the mafia is interested in our apartment. Callum leaned against the kitchen counter studying the pharmacy receipt again. They wanted confirmation. Confirmation of what? I asked. He looked up slowly. That you have someone else to lose. The room went silent after that. Outside, freezing rain rattled against the windows harder. The old radiator hissed unevenly beside the couch, barely warming the apartment. June swallowed hard and looked away first. Okay, she muttered. That answer was somehow worse. I rubbed both hands over my face, exhaustion pressing behind my eyes like a migraine. Less than 4 hours ago I had been worrying about rent and whether Ellis would let me pick up extra shifts next week. Now strangers were breaking into my apartment looking for leverage. Police, I said suddenly. We should call the police. Callum's expression did not change. And tell them what? That somebody broke in. They will ask why. Then we tell them the truth. That almost made him smile. Almost. Mara, a man died after drinking poison in your workplace tonight. The harbor police already know Vincent Shaw was involved. He folded the receipt carefully and placed it on the counter. The second your name enters an official report, Shaw's lawyers and Shaw's people will both find it. June shifted uneasily on the couch. Who exactly is Vincent Shaw? Shipping contracts. Warehouse unions. Port access. Callum's voice stayed flat. The kind of man who bankrupts neighborhoods and calls it business. Something bitter moved through his tone then disappeared again. I crossed my arms tightly. And you are different? He met my eyes without flinching. Not enough. That answer irritated me more because it sounded honest. June stood up suddenly. I need my backpack. She disappeared into the bedroom. A second later she cursed under her breath. Mara. I followed her down the narrow hallway. The bedroom looked worse than the living room. Mattress flipped halfway off the frame. Closet emptied. One of the floorboards near the window pried loose. June stood frozen beside her desk. My cash is gone. My stomach dropped instantly. How much? 700. Her voice cracked slightly. I have been saving since summer. $700. Pharmacy shifts. Babysitting. Birthday money. Gone in one night. June sank slowly onto the edge of the mattress, suddenly looking much younger than 17. I was finally close to tuition deposits, she whispered. Guilt hit me so hard I could barely breathe. Everything always landed on her too. Mom's hospital debt. My double shifts. This apartment. Now this. Callum appeared quietly in the doorway behind me. June wiped her eyes fast before he could fully see her crying. I will replace it, he said. She laughed once without humor. Right. With mafia money. June, I snapped. But Callum only nodded slightly like he understood the reaction. Fair criticism, he said. Then his phone buzzed again. He checked the screen and something in his posture sharpened immediately. We need to leave this apartment tonight. I stared at him in disbelief. Absolutely not. Shaw's people just hit another location near the docks. That has nothing to do with me. The man who died tonight worked for Shaw's accounting crew, Callum said quietly. Which means somebody believes you interfered with a message. Rainwater dripped steadily from the fire escape outside. Somewhere downstairs, a baby started crying through the thin apartment walls. Normal sounds. Normal lives continuing anyway. Then Callum looked directly at me and added the one thing that made my blood run cold again. And your diner did not open this morning because someone set fire to the kitchen an hour ago. The diner fire smelled like melted plastic and burnt grease 3 blocks away. By sunrise, half the neighborhood had gathered behind police tape watching smoke drift from what used to be Harbor Point Diner. I stood across the street wearing the same wrinkled sweater from the night before while firefighters rolled blackened equipment onto the sidewalk. Ellis sat on the curb near the ambulance rubbing both hands over his face like he had aged 10 years overnight. Electrical fire. One of the officers told a reporter nearby. Kitchen area. Callum stood beside me in silence. Neither of us believed that for a second. You knew this would happen, I said quietly. I knew Shaw would send a message. That place was Ellis's entire life. My throat tightened as another firefighter carried out the old pie display case covered in ash. People are going to lose jobs over this. Callum watched the building for a long moment before answering. That is how men like Shaw operate. Hurt enough ordinary people, and eventually everyone becomes too afraid to interfere. Something sharp twisted inside my chest. Anger. Exhaustion. Maybe both. You keep saying men like Shaw, I snapped. But you talk exactly like him. That finally made him look at me directly. No, he said quietly. I talk like someone who survived him. Before I could answer, Ellis spotted me through the crowd and pushed himself up from the curb. Mara. His voice sounded wrecked. I crossed the street immediately. Are you okay? I am 62 years old, he muttered while staring at the diner. Nobody hires 62-year-old short-order cooks after a fire. I swallowed hard. Ellis had given me shifts when nobody else would after Mom died. Let June eat free half the time. Covered our rent twice without embarrassing me about it. Now his entire business sat destroyed because of me. Ellis, you need to leave town for a while. The words stunned me enough that I just stared at him. He lowered his voice carefully. Police were asking about you before dawn. Then another group showed up asking the same questions without badges. Fear moved quietly through my stomach again. Ellis glanced once toward Callum standing near the sidewalk. Whatever this is, kid, he said softly. It followed you here. Guilt nearly crushed me. Around us, reporters kept filming the burned diner, while people from neighboring businesses whispered to each other. I could already feel it happening. The shift. The suspicion. Small neighborhoods always needed someone to blame. Mara. June stepped beside me holding 2 paper cups from the gas station across the street. Dark circles sat under her eyes from no sleep. Our landlord called. My stomach sank instantly. About the apartment? She nodded once. He says insurance will not cover the damage from the break-in, because the lock was already broken before. Of course it was. Another bill. Another problem. Another thing collapsing all at once. June handed me the coffee mechanically before looking toward the burned diner. I also got fired. What? Pharmacy said they are cutting staff. Her voice stayed flat in that dangerous way people use when they are trying not to fall apart in public. Apparently too much police attention around employees is bad for business. For a second I genuinely could not breathe. June worked 30 hours a week there. That paycheck kept our lights on half the time. Callum listened quietly beside us before reaching into his coat pocket. I instantly knew what he was about to do. Do not, I warned. He paused slightly. You need somewhere safe to stay. We need jobs, I shot back. Not charity. Something unreadable crossed his face then disappeared. You think I am offering charity? I think people around you keep losing things. The words landed harder than I expected. Callum looked away first. Across the street, firefighters finally shut off the last hose while smoke drifted from the broken diner windows into the cold morning air. Then Callum's phone rang again. He answered quietly, listening without speaking for several seconds. Whatever he heard changed his expression instantly. He ended the call and looked straight at me. June cannot go back to the pharmacy, he said. Why? Because Shaw's men are waiting there for her shift to start. The motel room smelled like bleach and old carpet, but at least nobody there knew our names. By noon, Callum had moved us 30 minutes outside the harbor to a highway motel squeezed between a tire shop and an abandoned diner with boarded windows. Room 12. 2 beds. Flickering television. Ice machine humming outside the door every 20 minutes. June sat cross-legged on one of the beds scrolling through job listings on her phone while pretending not to panic. I stood near the tiny sink staring at myself in the mirror. Same tired face. Same dark circles. But somehow everything behind my eyes looked older than yesterday. You should eat something, Callum said from the small table near the window. You always sound thrilled to be around people. He ignored the sarcasm and slid a paper bag toward me anyway. Pharmacy sandwiches. Cheap gas station chips. 2 bananas already turning brown. Ordinary food. Ordinary enough to make the situation feel even stranger. I am not hungry. That is usually when people need to eat most. June looked up from her phone. Honestly, he kind of sounds like a divorced dad. For the first time all day, something almost human crossed Callum's face. A quick breath that might have been a laugh before it disappeared again. I will take that as an insult. June actually smiled a little. Watching it hit me harder than I expected. She had barely spoken since the diner fire. I sat slowly on the edge of the other bed and unwrapped half the sandwich anyway. Turkey and processed cheese. My entire life currently balanced on a gas station sandwich in a motel room beside a man tied to organized crime. Unreal. Callum's phone kept vibrating every few minutes across the table. He checked each message quickly without replying. You are not sleeping, are you? I asked suddenly. He looked up. What? You keep reading the same message thread over and over. His eyes narrowed slightly like he was surprised I noticed. Occupational habit. No, I said quietly. That is anxiety. Silence stretched for a second. June glanced awkwardly between us before standing up. I am getting ice. The motel door shut behind her, leaving the room strangely quiet except for the heater rattling near the window. Callum leaned back in the chair slowly. You read people for a living? No. I grew up around exhausted adults pretending they were fine. That answer landed somewhere deeper than I intended. He looked away first. Outside, a truck engine roared past on the highway. My father used to do that, he said eventually. Pretend everything was handled. I stayed quiet, sensing he almost never talked about personal things. Then one day, Callum continued carefully, federal agents emptied our house while he sat at the kitchen table balancing checkbooks like numbers could save him. His voice never cracked, never softened. Somehow that made it sadder. How old were you? 17. I swallowed slowly. What happened to him? The heater buzzed loudly between us. He killed himself 3 months later. The words settled heavily into the room. No dramatic music.
No tears.
Just truth. Spoken flatly by someone who carried it too long. Suddenly I understood the notebooks in his truck. The obsession with receipts. The way he noticed overdue bills within seconds of entering my apartment. Control was the only thing keeping him standing upright. I am sorry, I said quietly. Callum nodded once like apologies were unfamiliar territory. Then the motel door burst open hard enough to hit the wall. June stumbled inside pale and breathless. There are 2 men outside asking the front desk about us. Every muscle in Callum's body changed instantly. Calm vanished. Focus replaced it. He stood up so fast the chair scraped sharply across the floor. Did they see you? I do not think so. He crossed to the motel window carefully and shifted the curtain half an inch. I watched his expression harden into something colder than before. That is not Shaw, he said quietly. Then who is it? I asked. Callum stepped back from the window slowly. Federal agents. The motel parking lot emptied in less than 30 seconds. That was the first thing I noticed after Callum said the words federal agents. A maintenance worker disappeared around the corner. A truck driver who had been smoking beside the ice machine suddenly climbed into his cab and left. Like people around here recognized trouble before it even arrived. Callum grabbed his coat from the chair and looked at June first. Take the bathroom bag and your phone charger. Why? She asked instantly. Because we are leaving now. No panic in his voice. No raised volume. Somehow that made everything feel more serious. I stood up slowly. If they are federal agents, why are we running? Callum looked at me like the answer should have been obvious. Because Shaw has people inside the Port Authority office and half the harbor precinct. If somebody tipped the wrong person that agents are looking for you, Shaw will move first. That sounds paranoid. That sounds alive. June was already stuffing clothes into a backpack with shaky hands. I hated how quickly she adapted to crisis. Kids from unstable homes learn that skill too early. Mara, Callum said quietly, you can hate me after this is over. Right now I need you. Moving. The words hit harder than they should have. Not because they were dramatic. Because they sounded exhausted. Like he was already expecting blame before I even gave it. 5 minutes later we slipped out the motel's rear stairwell into an alley behind the tire shop. The cold air smelled like gasoline and wet pavement. Callum kept walking without hesitation toward a narrow side street where his truck sat hidden behind a delivery van. How do you always know where to park? I muttered. Habit. Criminal habit? Survival habit. Fair enough. June climbed into the back seat this time while I sat in front gripping my backpack tightly against my chest. My phone buzzed halfway down the highway. Unknown number. I ignored it. It rang again immediately. Then again. Answer it, Callum said without looking away from the road. Absolutely not. If it is Shaw's people, silence confirms fear. I hated that he probably had a point. I answered on the 4th ring and held the phone carefully to my ear. Hello. Silence for 2 seconds. Then a calm male voice said, Miss Dempsey. This is Special Agent Theo Briggs with the Financial Crimes Task Force. Callum's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel the second he heard the name. We spoke with your employer this morning, the agent continued. We believe you witnessed a homicide connected to an active investigation. My pulse jumped hard. I do not know anything. Maybe not intentionally. But you are currently traveling with a man named Callum Vale. I turned slowly toward Callum. His expression had gone completely unreadable. You need to understand something, Briggs said carefully. Callum may act protective, but wherever he goes, people get hurt. The truck stayed silent except for the tires humming against the road. Miss Dempsey? Briggs asked. I swallowed hard. What do you want from me? To keep you alive long enough to testify. The line crackled softly. Because Vincent Shaw is not the only dangerous man in this situation. Callum reached over calmly and took the phone from my hand before I could answer. Still recording calls without warrants, Theo? He asked flatly. A pause. Then the agent sighed. You should have disappeared years ago, Callum. Probably. You know Shaw is escalating. I know you are 3 steps behind him. The tension between them felt old. Personal. Not cop versus criminal. Something messier. Where are you taking the girl? Briggs asked finally. Callum glanced once toward me before answering. Away from men who think fear solves everything. He ended the call before the agent could reply. My chest tightened again. You know him. Unfortunately. You lied to me. About what? You said you survived Shaw. I stared at him across the dark truck cab. But you are still inside all of this. Callum looked back toward the highway ahead. That is the problem, Mara. His voice dropped lower then. Tired enough to sound honest again. People like me usually do not get out clean. By late afternoon, we were sitting inside a ferry terminal 2 counties north of Baltimore pretending to be normal people. That was the strange part. Around us life kept moving. Families dragging coolers toward weekend boats. Construction workers eating vending machine sandwiches. A little girl crying because she dropped her pretzel on the floor. Meanwhile, my entire life had collapsed in less than 24 hours. June sat charging her phone beside the window while scrolling apartment listings we could never afford. I watched Callum across the terminal balancing receipts and cash on a small notebook like we were discussing grocery budgets, instead of hiding from criminals and federal agents. You seriously carry that thing everywhere? I asked finally. He looked down at the notebook in his hands. Yes. Why? Because numbers tell the truth faster than people do. I almost laughed at that. Almost. Then my phone buzzed again with another missed call from our landlord. 3 voicemails now. I already knew what they said. Rent overdue. Fire damage liability. Broken lease warnings. Real life did not stop because somebody poisoned a drink in a diner. Bills still arrived. Eviction still happened. I need to go back, I said quietly. June looked up immediately. Mara, we cannot keep hiding in bus stations forever. I rubbed my forehead hard. We have no jobs. No. Apartment soon. You have school. Callum closed the notebook slowly. Going back now is not safe. Nothing is safe anymore. My voice came out sharper than I intended. A few people nearby glanced over before looking away again. At least if I go back, maybe I can salvage something. You think Shaw burned the diner because of the whiskey? Callum asked calmly. No. He burned it because fear spreads faster when people lose income. His eyes held mine steadily. You returning home tells him the pressure worked. I hated that he made sense. I hated even more that part of me already depended on him making sense. That realization scared me enough to stand abruptly from the plastic terminal chair. I need air. I walked outside before either of them could stop me. The harbor wind cut through my coat instantly. Ferries groaned against the docks while gulls circled overhead screaming at each other. I gripped the railing hard and tried to think clearly for the first time all day. Mom used to say survival was expensive. She was right. Every bad thing in life seemed to come with invoices attached. Behind me, the terminal doors opened softly. I knew it was Callum before he spoke. June is scared. I stared out at the gray water. So am I. Silence settled between us. Then he said the one thing I was not prepared for. You should take your sister and leave Maryland. I turned sharply toward him. What? New Jersey. Delaware. Anywhere Shaw's people are not looking yet. And what happens to you? Callum shrugged once like the answer barely mattered. I handle the rest. Anger flared instantly beneath my exhaustion. You do not get to decide that. This situation exists because of me.
No, isnapat.
It exists because somebody tried to poison you. Same difference. The coldness in his voice startled me. Not angry cold. Resigned cold. Like a man already halfway convinced he deserved whatever happened next. You really think sacrificing yourself fixes everything? I asked quietly. Callum looked away toward the water. It fixes enough. Suddenly I understood something painful about him. He was not protecting us because he believed he could win. He was protecting us because he had already accepted losing. That terrified me more than any threat Shaw made. That is not noble, I said softly. That is just another way to give up. His jaw tightened instantly. For the first time since meeting him, I saw genuine emotion crack through the control. You think I do not know that, he said quietly. The words landed hard between us. Then his phone rang again. He answered immediately, listening in silence for several seconds before his entire posture changed. Dangerous focus. When? He asked sharply. A pause. How many? My stomach dropped. Callum ended the call and looked straight at me. June is gone. For one full second my brain refused to process the sentence. What? She left the terminal 10 minutes ago. His voice stayed controlled, but I could see it now. The panic underneath. Theo Briggs just found her walking toward the parking garage alone. The parking garage smelled like oil, cold concrete, and exhaust fumes trapped under low ceilings. My shoes slapped hard against the pavement as I ran beside Callum through rows of parked cars, while my heartbeat pounded loud enough to drown everything else out. June! My voice echoed upward through the garage levels. No answer. Theo Briggs stood near the far stairwell wearing a dark wool coat with one hand pressed against an earpiece. He looked tired in the way only people who lived on caffeine and bad decisions looked tired. She bolted when she saw me, he said the second we reached him. Why would she run from a federal agent? I snapped. Briggs glanced once toward Callum. Probably because somebody spent the last 24 hours telling her everyone is dangerous. She is 17, I shot back. She should be scared. Callum ignored both of us and crouched near the stairwell entrance instead. For a second I did not understand what he was looking at. Then I saw it. June's backpack lying against the wall. Half open. One strap torn. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might throw up. No, I grabbed the bag immediately. Her wallet sat inside. Phone charger. Textbooks. But no phone. No June. Panic exploded through my chest so violently my hands started shaking. Somebody took her. Briggs looked around the garage sharply. No witnesses yet. You lost her. I turned toward him so fast my voice cracked. You said you found her. I found her walking alone. Then two black sedans entered the garage from opposite ramps. He looked furious at himself. Professional timing. I pressed both hands against my forehead trying not to spiral completely. This was my fault. Every choice since the diner had pushed June deeper into danger. If I had ignored the poison drink, none of this would be happening. She would still be studying for chemistry finals instead of disappearing in a parking garage because of me. Callum stood slowly holding something small in his hand. A silver pharmacy name tag bent near the edges. June's. She fought back, he said quietly. Hearing that almost destroyed me. Briggs stepped closer carefully. Miss Dempsey, listen to me. Shaw's people are escalating because they think you are valuable leverage. Do not explain leverage to me right now. My voice came out shaking with anger and fear. I looked directly at Callum then. You said you could keep her safe. The words hit harder than shouting would have. Callum did not defend himself. Did not make excuses. He just stood there staring at the name tag in his hand like he already blamed himself more than I ever could. Mara, he said quietly. No, I backed away from him instantly. Do not. My throat burned painfully. Everywhere you go, people get hurt. Theo was right. Something dark moved across Callum's face then disappeared again behind control. Briggs watched both of us carefully without interrupting. I did not ask for any of this, I whispered. I was serving fries 2 days ago. June was saving for community college. Ellis had a diner. Tears threatened finally, but anger held them back. Now everything is gone. Callum looked exhausted suddenly. Older. I know. No, you do not. I pointed toward the empty parking spaces around us. You still have people who answer your calls. Trucks. Money. Places to go. My voice cracked harder then. I have a sister who disappeared because I stood near you too long. Silence spread heavily through the garage. Briggs rubbed one hand over his jaw before speaking carefully. Fighting each other wastes time. I do not care. But that was not true. I cared too much. That was the problem. Because even now, part of me still trusted Callum to fix this somehow, and I hated myself for it. Callum finally looked at me again. His gray eyes were steady, but something underneath them looked wrecked. You should hate me, he said quietly. Later. He slipped June's name tag carefully into his coat pocket. Right now I need you to tell me everything she would do if she was scared and trying to look brave. The question hit me harder than any apology could have, because it sounded like somebody genuinely trying to find her, not defend himself. And for the first time all night I realized Callum was terrified too. 3 hours later, I sat inside a 24-hour laundromat watching Callum Vale fold clean towels like a man trying to keep himself from breaking apart. The place was nearly empty except for an elderly woman reading a magazine beside the dryers and a college kid asleep against a vending machine. Warm air smelled like detergent and overheated fabric. Outside the windows, trucks rolled past the highway without slowing down. Briggs had moved to another location to check traffic cameras near the garage. Callum refused to sit still long enough to wait. The second we arrived at the laundromat safe house above the repair shop next door, he started doing things. Practical things. Calling port workers. Paying somebody cash to access ferry security footage. Writing license plate numbers onto receipts because he could not find proper paper fast enough. He even repaired the broken lock on the upstairs apartment himself using tools from the shop downstairs.
No speeches. No dramatic premises.
Just movement. Constant movement. I watched him through the laundromat window while he fed quarters into a dryer that already worked perfectly fine. You are going to wear a hole through those towels, I said finally. He glanced over briefly. Keeps my hands busy. Honest again. That dangerous kind of honesty exhausted people slipped into when they stopped having energy for performance. My phone rested face down. Beside me on the plastic chair. No calls from June.
No ransom demands.
Nothing. Somehow the silence felt worse. You should sleep for an hour, Callum said without looking up. I am not sleeping while my sister is missing. You are shaking. I looked down. He was right. My hands had not stopped trembling since the parking garage. I crossed my arms tightly instead. Did Briggs find anything? One sedan belongs to a shell company tied to Shaw's warehouse district. The dryer buzzed loudly behind him. The second car disappeared near Dundalk. Meaning this was planned. Something bitter moved through his voice. Which means Shaw expected pressure to push someone into making a mistake. The realization settled slowly into my chest. June leaving the terminal alone had not just been panic. It had been timing. Somebody wanted separation. I stared at the spinning dryers for several seconds before speaking again. She left because of me. Callum finally stopped moving. No, I dragged her into this. Mara. He folded one towel carefully before continuing. People make their own choices under stress. I laughed quietly without humor. That sounds like something a therapist says before handing you a bill. A faint crack of amusement crossed his expression and disappeared again. Then the laundromat door opened. Every muscle in my body tightened instantly until I saw Briggs step inside carrying 2 greasy takeout bags. Nobody followed me, he said immediately. Relax. You look like hell, I muttered. Occupational hazard. Briggs dropped the food onto the table near me before pulling folded papers from his coat pocket. I got partial footage from the garage exit. Callum crossed the room instantly. The 2 men studied grainy black and white images from a traffic camera, while I stood behind them trying to make sense of blurred license plates and dark sedan outlines. Then Briggs tapped one frame sharply. There. My stomach twisted. June sat in the back seat of one car staring out the window. Not tied up. Not unconscious. Just pale and terrified. She is alive, I whispered. Relief hit so fast it almost hurt. Callum stared at the image hard enough to memorize every pixel. Can you track the route? Briggs nodded once. Industrial district near the old shipyard. Silence settled heavily for a second. Then Briggs looked directly at Callum. If Shaw has her there, this turns ugly fast. No, Callum said quietly. It turns expensive. Before I could ask what that meant, he pulled a thick envelope from inside his coat and handed it to Briggs. Cash. More money than I had probably seen in one place in my entire life. Get every independent dock camera in that district unlocked within the hour. Briggs raised an eyebrow. That was supposed to pay your legal team. Priorities changed. The simple way he said it hit me unexpectedly hard. Because for the first time since this nightmare started, Callum was not protecting his empire, his business, or himself. He was burning through his own escape plan trying to bring my sister home. The apartment above the laundromat had a tiny kitchen with crooked cabinets and a radio that only picked up one station clearly after midnight. Around 2 a.m, soft jazz drifted through bursts of static, while I sat barefoot at the table staring at cold instant noodles I still had not touched. Downstairs, dryers hummed steadily through the floorboards. It should have felt comforting. Instead, everything felt temporary, like we were hiding inside somebody else's life for a few borrowed hours. Briggs had gone back to the harbor district with the camera footage. Callum stayed upstairs pretending to organize maps spread across the kitchen counter, but I noticed he kept rereading the same street names over and over. Exhaustion was finally catching him. I watched him quietly while twisting the pharmacy receipt from my pocket between my fingers. "You missed a spot," I said eventually. He looked up. "What?" I pointed toward the side of his hand. A thin streak of dried blood crossed his knuckles near the thumb, probably from repairing locks downstairs or smashing his hand into something when nobody was watching. He stared at it for a second like he genuinely had not noticed. "Occupational hazard," he muttered. "That phrase is getting old." Something faint almost reached his eyes before fading again. I stood slowly and crossed the tiny kitchen toward the sink cabinet. After digging through mismatched supplies for a minute, I found a half-empty first aid kit beside expired aspirin bottles. "Sit down. Mara, you are bleeding on somebody's borrowed maps." He hesitated just long enough to prove he hated accepting help before finally lowering himself into the chair across from me. Close, he looked terrible. Pale beneath the harbor tan. Shadows under his eyes darker than before. I dipped gauze under warm water carefully. "This will sting." "Noted." I cleaned the cut in silence while the radio crackled softly behind us. His hand stayed perfectly still beneath mine, but tension sat in every muscle like he was unused to people touching him without violence attached to it. "You do not have to keep doing this alone," I said quietly before thinking better of it. The second the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Callum's expression closed immediately. That is usually how this kind of life works. There it was again. That wall. Not cruel. Just automatic. Built brick by brick over years. I pulled my hand back too quickly and knocked the bottle of rubbing alcohol onto the floor. It shattered beside the table loudly enough to make both of us jump. "Great," I muttered. "Perfect." The sharp chemical smell spread instantly through the kitchen. My pulse spiked embarrassingly fast from the noise and exhaustion combined. I crouched too quickly to clean the glass and dizziness hit immediately. "Careful." Callum reached toward me automatically, but I flinched back before he touched my arm. The movement froze both of us. Silence settled heavily across the room after that. I hated myself for reacting that way. Not because I thought he would hurt me, because part of me still expected people to eventually become dangerous when life got bad enough. Callum slowly lowered his hand without comment. "Sorry," I whispered finally. He shook his head once. "Do not apologize for survival instincts." The answer somehow made me feel worse. I cleaned the broken glass silently while he moved the maps aside to help without arguing. Ordinary motions. Small ones. The kind people do when they are too tired to pretend everything is fine anymore. Then the radio suddenly crackled louder before shifting into a weather report from Baltimore Harbor. Cargo traffic delays. Police activity near the old shipyard district. Callum's entire body went still. "What?" I asked immediately. He walked toward the radio slowly, listening harder. "That district should be quiet tonight." My stomach tightened. "You think it is connected?" Before he could answer, headlights swept briefly across the apartment window downstairs. Both of us froze instantly. A car door slammed outside. Then another. Callum moved toward the kitchen light switch on instinct while reaching for his coat with the other hand. I noticed something then that made fear crawl slowly up my spine again. For the first time since meeting him, his hands were shaking too. The headlights outside belonged to Theo Briggs. The relief hit so suddenly my knees almost gave out. He climbed the narrow stairs carrying a cardboard tray of takeout coffees and looked between us the second he entered the apartment. "You both look terrible," he said. Comforting, I muttered. Briggs set the drinks on the kitchen counter beside the maps. I found the sedan. Every bit of warmth disappeared from the room instantly. Callum stepped forward first. Where? Warehouse district near Pier 7. Shaw still uses part of the old refrigeration facility there. Briggs rubbed one hand over his tired face. But there is a problem. There is always a problem, Callum said flatly. Briggs nodded toward me carefully. June called dispatch from a payphone 20 minutes ago. My heart jumped hard. She what? She got away briefly. Relief and panic collided so fast inside my chest it hurt. Where is she now? Briggs hesitated. That hesitation told me enough before he even answered. She hung up after 12 seconds. Silence settled heavily over the kitchen again. Callum looked down at the map spread across the counter, thinking fast. Too fast. His exhaustion showed in small cracks now. The way he pressed fingers against his temple. The slight delay before responding. She would not run randomly, he said quietly. She was trying to leave a location trail. Briggs nodded once. That is what I thought. I moved toward the counter beside them before realizing something strange. The two men who barely trusted each other 12 hours ago were suddenly working together. Because June mattered more than their history. Real life did that sometimes. It rearranged loyalties without warning. She hates cold storage buildings, I said suddenly. Both men looked at me. When we were kids, Mom locked us overnight in a church pantry once because she disappeared on a binge. My throat tightened around the memory. June still panics in places without windows. Callum's eyes sharpened immediately. He traced one finger across the harbor map until it stopped near the edge of the pier district. The old refrigeration facility has a side loading dock with exterior access. Briggs looked over. You think she would head toward an exit? I think she would stay close to air. Callum grabbed his coat instantly. We are out of time. Briggs caught his arm before he could move past. You walk into that warehouse alone and Shaw buries you there. Then I will disappoint him. Callum. Briggs lowered his voice. You are exhausted. And June is 17. The answer ended the argument immediately. I watched Callum gather papers from the counter quickly, but his movements slowed halfway through searching for a flashlight. He checked one drawer twice before realizing it was already in his hand. Tiny mistake. Tiny sign of exhaustion. Something about it hurt unexpectedly to witness. Wait, I said quietly. Both men looked at me. I crossed the kitchen toward the cabinet near the sink and pulled out the old wool scarf I had been using as a blanket upstairs. Dark gray. Frayed at the edges. Mom bought it at a thrift store years ago. I held it out awkwardly toward Callum. The docks are freezing at night. For 1 second nobody moved. It was such a small thing. Just a scarf. But after everything that happened, the gesture felt strangely intimate. Not ownership. Not obligation. Choice. Callum stared at the scarf like he did not know what to do with kindness offered freely. Mara, he started quietly. Take it. My voice came. Out softer this time. Please. Slowly, carefully, he accepted it from my hands. His fingers brushed mine only briefly, but I noticed he stopped shaking for the first time all night. Briggs cleared his throat awkwardly and looked away toward the window like he suddenly needed to study parking lot traffic. I will call local units near Pier 7, he muttered. Unofficially. Callum wrapped the scarf once around his neck before reaching for the apartment door. Then he paused beside me unexpectedly. You do not have to come, he said quietly. No pressure. No command. Just truth. I looked at him for a long moment. At the exhaustion in his face. The fear he kept trying to hide. The man who had spent 2 days trying to solve everyone else's problems, while quietly believing he deserved none of the mercy himself. I know, I answered softly. Then I grabbed my coat anyway and followed him out the door. The old refrigeration warehouse at Pier 7 looked abandoned from the outside. Rusted loading doors. Broken security lights. Salt stains climbing the concrete walls from years of harbor wind. But inside somebody had recently restored power. Thin strips of fluorescent light glowed through cracked windows near the roofline. Briggs parked 2 blocks away beside a fenced shipping yard, while Callum checked the magazine inside a borrowed handgun with quiet efficiency. I hated the sight of it, not because it surprised me anymore, because part of me understood why he carried it. You stay behind us, Briggs said firmly. I mean it, Mara. I nodded even though my stomach twisted hard enough to make me nauseous. Nobody spoke during the walk toward the building. The harbor air smelled like diesel fuel and freezing seawater. Somewhere nearby, chains clanged softly against a docked cargo vessel. Real sounds. Real places. Not some glamorous criminal empire. Just tired industrial buildings where dangerous people hid because ordinary workers stopped asking questions years ago. Callum found the side entrance exactly where he predicted. The lock had been cut recently. Inside, the warehouse hummed with refrigeration fans still somehow running after all these years. The cold hit. Instantly. My chest tightened at the endless maze of narrow storage corridors and metal doors. June. My voice echoed weakly through the building. No answer. Briggs moved ahead, carefully checking corners while Callum scanned the rooms with that same controlled focus I had seen since the diner. But now I noticed the exhaustion underneath it too. The slower reactions. The stiffness in his shoulders. People were not machines no matter how hard they pretended. Then we heard it. 3 sharp knocks somewhere deeper inside the warehouse. Not random. Rhythmic. June used to do that on apartment walls as a kid whenever thunderstorms scared her. My entire body jolted forward before either man could stop me. Mara, Callum warned sharply. But I was already running toward the sound. The corridor opened into an old break room with overturned chairs and stacked crates. June sat on the floor near the far wall with zip ties around her wrists. Pale. Exhausted. Alive. June. I dropped beside her so fast my knees slammed painfully against concrete. She burst into tears immediately the second I touched her shoulders. Real tears. Angry ones. Terrified ones. I tried to leave markers, she whispered shakily while I fumbled to cut the restraints with Briggs's pocket knife. I did not know if it worked. It worked. My own voice broke finally. It worked. Behind us, Callum searched the rest of the room carefully before lowering his gun slightly. Shaw is gone, he said. Briggs checked another doorway. Looks rushed. Somebody cleared out fast. Then I noticed Callum staring at a folding table near the wall. Several folders sat there beside an old portable radio crackling softly through static. Financial ledgers. Shipping schedules. Evidence. Briggs saw them too and swore quietly under his breath. This is enough to bury half the Port Authority. Callum stayed silent for several seconds before making a decision I could physically see cost him something. He picked up the folders and handed them directly to Briggs. No hesitation after that. No conditions. Briggs looked genuinely shocked. Callum, you said you wanted Shaw. His voice sounded tired beyond words now. Take him. Silence filled the freezing room. I realized then what he was really giving away. Not just evidence. Control. Leverage. The last fragile protection keeping his own world standing. Briggs understood it too. If this goes public, the agent said carefully, you are finished. Callum looked toward me and June sitting together on the floor. Maybe. Then he shrugged once. Maybe some things should be. 6 months later, spring sunlight spilled through the windows of a small repair garage near the harbor where an old kitchen radio played baseball commentary between bursts of static. June worked weekends at the front desk while finishing community college applications. Ellis had reopened a smaller diner 2 streets over with help from neighborhood donations, and an insurance settlement Briggs quietly pushed through faster than expected. Life still was not easy. Bills still stacked up. I still worked double shifts sometimes. And Callum still woke up some nights unable to sleep more than 3 hours at a time. Trauma did not disappear because people loved each other. But some evenings after closing time, he would sit at the garage workbench repairing broken radios customers abandoned years ago, while I balanced receipts beside him pretending not to notice he always remembered to bring extra sandwiches home for June.
No dramatic speeches.
No perfect ending. Just small choices repeated long enough to become trust. One night, while static crackled softly through another half-repaired radio, I asked him why he kept fixing things nobody else wanted anymore. Callum looked down at the screwdriver in his hand for a long moment before answering. Because broken things still make noise, he said quietly. Sometimes that means they are not done yet. If this story touched you, subscribe, like, and share it with someone who still believes love can heal damaged souls.